Mark Grayson's story in the Invincible comics doesn't end with the Viltrumite War. It doesn't even end with him killing Thragg. The actual ending of the comic is way bigger and way weirder than anything the show is going to be able to fit into one season. Mark becomes the literal emperor of the Viltrumite Empire and rules over the galaxy for over 500 years. His mom dies, his friends die, Eve almost dies. The final issues of the Invincible comic jump 500 years into the future and show what happens to Mark Grayson long after the show is going to end. And honestly, what happens to Mark in that future is one of the most underrated comic endings of the last 20 years. Show-only fans have no idea what's coming. Mark becoming emperor isn't a quick promotion. It happens through one of the most brutal sequences of deaths in the entire comic. The Viltrumite War ends with Thragg surviving and getting exiled, while Nolan is revealed to be the son of Lord Argyll, the original emperor of Viltrum. That makes Nolan the rightful heir, and he takes over leadership of the Viltrumites with the goal of teaching them peace and cooperation. That doesn't last. Thragg comes back during a fight on the moon, ambushes Nolan and Debbie, and reveals Nolan's true heritage to him before nearly killing them both. Nolan survives that encounter only because Craig, Anissa, and the other elite Viltrumites turn on Thragg when they find out Argyll's heir has been right in front of them. Thragg gets sentenced to exile on the planet Thraxa, where he spends years rebuilding an army of Viltrumite Thraxan hybrid children to come back and reclaim the throne. He eventually does come back, kills Oliver in front of Mark by punching through his chest, and the final fight between Mark and Thragg happens on the surface of the sun itself. They burn each other alive while throwing punches, both of them stripped of their flesh from the heat, and Mark finally kills Thragg by ripping his throat out with his teeth. Alan flies in at the last second and saves Mark from being incinerated. Nolan dies during this whole arc fighting Thragg, and his final words to Mark are about changing the Viltrumite people for the better. After all that loss, Mark is the only Argyll heir left standing. The throne is his by default, and the crazy part about Mark's reign is how successful he actually is. Most superhero comics would set up hero becomes king of evil empire as a tragic ending where the hero gets corrupted by power. The Invincible comic does the opposite. Mark uses his position to fundamentally change Viltrumite culture from the ground up. He outlaws the eugenics program that the Empire was built on. He stops the conquering of inhabited planets. He turns the Viltrumites from a tyrannical military dictatorship into a peacekeeping force that actually does the things they used to lie about doing. Within a few decades, the galaxy under Viltrumite rule is more peaceful than it's been in thousands of years. The coalition of planets, the alliance that originally formed to fight the Viltrumites, becomes obsolete because there's nothing left to fight. Alan the alien doesn't love this because the coalition was his life's work, but even he eventually accepts that Mark did what nobody else could. Mark is genuinely good at being emperor. Mark's rule isn't easy. The comic doesn't pretend he just snaps his fingers and fixes everything. He spends decades fighting internal Viltrumite rebellions from old-school warriors who refuse to accept the new peaceful empire. He has to personally kill Viltrumites who continue conquering planets behind his back. He executes traitors. He makes hard calls that go against his teenage idealism. The comic shows Mark growing colder over the centuries, becoming more pragmatic, more willing to do what needs to be done. By the 500-year mark, Mark Grayson is barely recognizable as the kid who threw up after his first fight with Doc Seismic. He's still good, he still has his core values, but he's seen too much, killed too many enemies, and outlived too many friends to be the same Mark we met in Invincible issue 1. The comic plays this evolution as both tragic and necessary. The teenager from upstate Illinois had to die so the Emperor could be born, and Mark accepts that trade because the alternative was letting the Empire stay evil forever. There's also a pair of revenge subplots that the comic teases without fully resolving, and they make the future of the Invincible universe feel like it's still alive even after the main story ends. Battle Beast's daughter is shown growing up with the same uncontrollable killing instinct as her father, and she explicitly wants revenge on Mark for Battle Beast's death. Angstrom Levy's son also exists in this future and has the same multiverse warping powers his father had, and he openly hates Mark for what happened to his dad. Both of these characters are essentially future villains who would absolutely come for Mark if Kirkman decided to write more Invincible. They never get a confrontation in the main 144-issue run, but Kirkman drops them in the final issue specifically to show that Mark's peaceful galaxy isn't permanent. Eventually, somebody's going to come for him. Eventually, the cycle starts again. The comic ends on Mark's smile, but the seeds for the next conflict are already planted. That's some of the smartest comic writing of the last 2 decades. The Alan and Mark relationship over those 500 years deserves its own attention because the comic does something brutal with it. The biggest fracture between them happens way before the time skip during the Scourge virus storyline. Alan, as the new leader of the coalition after Thetis dies, gets handed a perfected version of the virus that can wipe out all Viltrumites. The catch is that it could also kill humans because of how genetically similar the two species are. Alan flies to Earth with Oliver to use it. Mark refuses to let him risk humanity. They fight. Oliver actually accidentally hits Mark with the virus during the struggle, and Mark almost dies before Thragg's Viltrumite scientists save him. Alan and Mark patch things up afterwards, but the trust is permanently dented. Centuries later, Alan still resents how much power the Viltrumite Empire has under Mark's rule. The coalition was built to oppose Viltrum, and now Viltrum is running the galaxy with Mark in charge. The two of them eventually go through more conflict over Empire politics, with Alan feeling like the galaxy is just trading one form of Imperial control for another, even if Mark's version is friendlier. They eventually rebuild the friendship because the bond between them is too deep to break, but the comic doesn't pretend it was easy. Even your best friend can become your enemy if you become powerful enough. That's a heavy lesson for a kid who started his story as a high school senior trying to figure out his powers. Then comes the part that hits hardest, which is the slow goodbye to everyone he knew on Earth. Viltrumites live for thousands of years. Humans don't. Mark watches his mom Debbie grow old and die. Cecil dies. Most of the original Guardians of the Globe die. Robot ends up as a brain in a jar advising the immortal, who's still around because the name fits. Eventually, everyone Mark grew up with is gone, and the Earth he remembers from his teen years exists only in his memory. The comic spends a few panels showing Debbie as a grandma to Mark's kids before she passes, which is genuinely one of the sweetest moments in the entire run, but it also drives home how lonely Mark's future is going to be. He's the emperor of the universe, and he's outlived everyone he loved as a kid. Eve is a different story. She and Mark have a daughter named Tara, and they raise her together while Mark splits time between Earth and Viltrum. Their marriage isn't perfect. The comic doesn't shy away from showing them argue, disagree, and even hurt each other. Tara grows up as a half-Viltrumite kid in space, gets frustrated with her famous parents, and eventually leaves to do humanitarian work on her own. The family stuff feels real because Kirkman didn't write Mark and Eve as some idealized superhero couple. They're two people doing their best to raise a daughter while one of them is running a galactic empire. Then comes the twist. During the final fight against Thragg, Ursal, his daughter, seemingly kills Eve. Mark thinks she's gone forever, but Eve's biokinetic powers automatically resurrect her at the moment of death, restoring her body completely. She comes back. Later in the future, she also dies of old age, and the same thing happens. Eve realizes her powers make her effectively immortal. She gets to live alongside Mark for as long as he does. After watching everyone else age and die, Mark gets one person who never leaves him. That's the comic's reward for him after centuries of loss. There's also the Marcus situation, which is the comic's darkest unresolved story arc. When Anissa, the Viltrumite warrior, sexually assaulted Mark in a previous storyline, she got pregnant. Mark didn't know about the kid for years. By the time he finds out, his son Marcus is already a child being raised on Earth by Anissa and her husband Scott. The final issue of the comic, Invincible number 144, opens with Mark explaining the entire history of the Viltrum Empire to Marcus. Mark is sorry. He apologizes for not being there. He tells Marcus he respects his choice to stay on Earth instead of joining the Empire. Marcus eventually becomes Kid Invincible and joins the Guardians of the Globe, carrying on Mark's superhero name back home, while Mark himself is light years away running the galaxy. It's a complicated father-son relationship born from one of the most uncomfortable moments in the entire comic, but Kirkman handles it with surprising grace. Marcus isn't bitter. Mark isn't dismissive. They just figure out how to be family despite the circumstances. The very last scene of the Invincible comic is small but huge. Mark and Eve are together, looking at a peaceful galaxy, and Mark thinks back to something his dad Nolan said to him in Invincible issue 11. Way back when Mark was a teenager, Nolan asked him a question to convince him to embrace his Viltrumite heritage. The exact line was, "What will you have after 500 years?" Nolan was telling Mark that humans are temporary, that everything mortal fades, and that joining the Viltrumites was the only way to have anything that lasts. Teen Mark rejected the question. He chose Earth. He chose his mom and his friends and being human. Now, 500 years later, Mark thinks about that question again. He has Eve. He has his kids. He has a peaceful galaxy. He has a legacy nobody thought possible, and he smiles. The comic ends on that single panel of Mark smiling because he finally has the answer. He has everything, not because he gave up his humanity for Viltrumite power, but because he refused to choose between the two. That smile is one of the most quietly powerful endings in modern comics, and it works because it took 144 issues to earn it. The reason this future arc matters for show fans is that the Invincible TV series is going to have to deal with this material eventually. Robert Kirkman has said the show will adapt the entire comic, all 144 issues, which means the 500-year time skip is coming. Maybe not in Season 5, maybe not in Season 6, but it's coming. And when it does, the show is going to face the same challenge the comic faced, which is showing a hero who wins so completely that there's nothing left to fight. Most superhero stories end at the climactic battle. Mark's story keeps going for centuries after, and the question becomes, What does a hero do when they've already saved everything? Mark's answer is rule it well, make it better than it was, outlive your enemies and your friends and the version of yourself you used to be, and find peace in what you built. The show also has to figure out how to handle the deaths of beloved characters. Debbie dies of old age, Cecil dies, Robot ends up as a brain in a jar. The supporting cast that the show has spent years making fans love is going to be wiped out by time itself, not by any villain. That's emotionally heavier than any explosive finale because there's no fight to win. Time just happens, and Mark has to keep going. Whether the show commits to that ending or finds a different way out, the comic version of Mark Grayson at the end of Invincible is genuinely one of the most well-earned hero conclusions ever written. He becomes Emperor, he fixes the Viltrumites, he outlives Earth, he keeps Eve, he makes peace with Marcus, and after 500 years of building a better universe, he gets to look at what he made and finally smile. Drop a comment with your prediction for whether the show will commit to the 500-year time skip or whether they'll soften the ending. Subscribe if you're new. More Invincible deep dives coming as we head towards Season 5.